Hello and welcome back to the Deadly series Abridged. I'm your host. Now, where last we left off with Sprocket, he was running naked through a forest of some sort, and now we are back to Sprocket, Chapter 3, or just the second Sprocket chapter, but chapter 3 within the book. But yes, let's not dilly-dally, let's not dawdle, let's not piss-fart or fuck-ass around. Let's get straight, or LGBTIQA, to it. Sprocket's complaining about how branches are tearing at his skin, he's getting leaves and twigs whacking him in the face because, well, when you're running through the forest like a mad beast, or a wild beast, that sort of stuff will happen to you. So, go figure. He's saying that the rainforest is damp and cool. The calls of kookaburras and bellbirds rang out as he's forcing his way over creeks and through strands of thick tree ferns. Okay, so I think in the previous Sprocket chapter I was talking about how I thought it was Queensland. I'm now beginning to think this might actually be New South Wales, because I don't think they get bellbirds in, well, they probably get kookaburras all over the country, but I don't think they get bellbirds up in, Queensland. And yeah, it's sounding more like a temperate rainforest than just a tropical rainforest. At least he doesn't have to worry about the gimpy, just constantly running. He won't stop moving, and he's just running downhill. He's aiming for the lowlands where he's hoping he can still get help, but he can still hear the shrill voices of the little twerps, but they are getting fainter and fainter. But he knows that they're still following his trail. Finally, he gets to a point where he just can't push it any harder. He just collapses to the ground and tries to silence his roaring breath. He says it's like a terrible gusting wind. Surely anyone within a couple of k's could have heard it. He has to hide. So with his last remaining strength, he pushes himself into a hollow log. It was dark inside, and there's only just enough room for him to squeeze in. Now, he's lucky that he's a young kid, or a teenager, because there's no way he'd be able to do that as an adult, because you'd need a bloody big hollow tree to squeeze into. His arms are pinned to his side, go figure, and the log's only opened at one end, and his feet are sticking out behind him, which that would be a pretty funny thing to come across, just a hollow log lying on the ground with some bloody feet poking out and no sign of clothing, shoes or socks. As his eyes adjust to the darkness, the interior of the log begins to become a bit clearer. It's damp and it smells of fungi, and he's just lying there shivering. He's just waiting and waiting and waiting and then waiting a bit more. And then he begins to think. He can't remember or recognise any faces. Out loud he asks, "Mum?" But the word sounds strange to him, as if he'd never used it. Who was his mother? Did he have one? Suddenly, 2 points of light glowed a few centimetres from his face, a couple of inches. They blinked. There was only one image inside his head. It froze his brain and it took over the log. It fills his universe, and the vision of a slithering, scaled horror permeates him. Every nerve in his body calls out, "Get away! Run! Wriggle out! Better be taken prisoner than to die and rot in a coffin log in the depths of a forest." The snake struck just below his right eye. Its fangs pierced his cheek like two superheated needles. He begins to shake his head wildly from side to side, but, of course, it's still clinging on. He's somehow able to stifle his screams, push himself backwards, scraping the fuck out of himself, and he's able to spring to his feet and grabs the snake, and ripping it away and just throwing it into the ferns. And blood dribbled. So, wow. Way to ruin a tense moment. Blood dribbled down his face. The snake slithers out of sight, but not before he notices that it's green, a grass snake, so it's not poisonous and not dangerous. Now, I do have a problem with that, because A poisonous snake would be a snake that if you eat it, it would poison you. What the author, Morris Gleitzman or Paul Jennings meant to say was it's not a venomous snake. Venomous snakes are the ones that poison you. They're like a brown snake or a copperhead or a black snake or a taipan, something like that. They are venomous snakes, but they are not poisonous snakes, so you can eat them without being poisoned. So I think it was just a thing that people didn't really worry about in the 90s and the turn of the century, but I like to think that people better understand the difference between a poisonous snake and a venomous snake. Now, where was I? He stands still, listening and rubbing his cheek where it hurt. Go figure. The sun had grown warm where it filtered through the trees, and the hum of insects filled the air. A million thoughts buzzed inside his head. I see what they did there. Very nice. Not wordplay or alliteration, but thematic. It was like a good keeping on theme. He starts trying to concentrate on what's important. He's in a desperate situation, naked and alone in a forest, which we established in the previous chapter. There would be poisonous snakes around for sure. Now, again, they say poisonous instead of venomous snakes because I'm not 100% sure, but from what I can recall, Australia doesn't actually have any poisonous snakes. We only have venomous or non-venomous snakes. So, unless he's planning on eating every snake he comes across, he should be fine in terms of poisonous snakes. To make matters worse, his stomach ache had returned, because remember, he was desperate for a shit in the previous chapter, and yeah, he's clearly eaten something that he shouldn't have eaten. He says that it's swollen, that his stomach is swollen and gurgling as if he drunk too much Coke. So let that be a lesson, kids. Don't drink too much Coca-Cola, otherwise you'll have a rumbling, grumbling stomach. The more you know. Suddenly, his heart stops. Well, now that is a very problematic scenario. If your heart stops, it generally means you're about to die. So yeah, if your heart stops, I recommend you seek medical advice. Snap. There's a sharp sound of a twig breaking, cracking through the trees. Someone was walking around, and not far off. Sprocket is frozen, only moving his eyeballs, and he tries to impersonate a tree, just a naked teenage tree, because of course, that if in doubt, if you're totally scared, impersonate a naked teenage tree in the middle of a temperate rainforest, and you'll be good. No one will be able to see you. Perfect camouflage, 2020, 8 out of 8, mate. He sees someone, and it's a big person. It's all he can tell. Big, heavy, moving slowly. I'm saved, he was thinking. Help was at hand. He goes to call out, but stops himself. The person was searching under leaves and branches, pausing to peer into logs and burrows. Slowly, slowly, he turns his head towards the intruder. Amazing, incredible, impossible, a naked man, a huge fellow with a great big belly. He had long, greasy hair and a matted black beard. His chest was covered in tight curls, but apart from his own hair, he wore nothing, not a stitch. He was as naked as Sprocket. Now, I'm sure you could make some assumptions. He's probably like Scottish or Greek or something like that, but that's neither here nor there. So the guy keeps searching around, and he's worried, and Sprocket's worried that he's going to suddenly come across a tree that looks like a naked boy. And does he belong to this man? Was he searching for his long-lost son? Or was he with the child terrorists under the orders from that bossy little hooper scooper? Either way, Sprocket posits that the guy is big enough to rip his head off. He just really doesn't want to get caught when all of a sudden, aha! Gotcha! Sprocket gasps in terror. I was dead. I was gone. I was history. I was saved. The big man finds a ball. A volleyball, actually. And, yeah, Sprocket's fine. So he wasn't hunted for by the big, hairy, naked man at all. And it turns out he's not truly naked. He's wearing boots. And with the sort of state Sprocket's in, He's incredibly envious of having a nice pair of boots right now. He channels his inner Assassin's Creed and starts trailing the man, just hobbling along, keeping a safe distance, and he wants to make sure that it's not like for the little kids, because little kids like balls, even kids with mobile phones and knives, which again, very important information to know. Little kids like balls, knives and mobile phones. I'm sure there's something untoward that you could pick up from that. Sprocket sees a break in the trees, and he sees a dusty track curling its way up to a distant ridge with a little speck screaming away, creating a little dust cloud, and he's pretty certain that it's the Hummer going the opposite direction. So thankfully the hairy chest isn't leading him into a trap. So let's see, I can skim over a bit of this. Sprocket is hopeful that it's not going to be a long journey, and it isn't. After only a couple of minutes, they approach a clearing, and it's a compound, like surrounded by razor wire, huge fence, watchman's hut, you name it. And on the other side is a playing field with carefully mown grass, high nets, and yeah, a net stretched between two poles. So it's a volleyball court. Okay, and it appears that there are a whole lot of mountain ash trees growing around this compound, which, I'm not sure if mountain ash grow a lot in New South Wales, but they're basically the world's tallest flowering tree, and I know that we have a lot of them growing in Victoria. So that leads me to believe that this place is probably on the Sapphire Coast of New South Wales, so it's probably near Bega or Merimbula or Bermagui or Tathra or just somewhere like that, or even as far south as maybe like, what's it called? Is it Ord River? No, Ord River's up in Northern Territory or WA. It's Cairn River? Something like that. Let's see, so Hairy Chest passes through the gate, jogs onto the oval and drops the ball, whistles and gets a whole lot of people to come out. And here, rather than getting some food descriptions or some banner descriptions, we get some people descriptions. So yay, this is going to be fun. I'm going to read this verbatim rather than abridging, because who doesn't want to hear about a bunch of naked people who are middle-aged running onto a volleyball court? Not that I'm ageist or anything, it's just from a teenage boy's perspective, this would be pretty horrifying. So there's a bald bloke who is sunburnt. He was as red as a lobster, especially on his bum. After him came a short, plump, matronly woman. There was also a woman with long grey hair and a miserable-looking bloke about the same size as him, as me, like as Sprocket size. And the weirdest one was a tall and thin guy with a frizzy afro hairdo. Without any clothes on, he reminds Sprocket of a standard rose that had gone wild on the top. The whole group lines up in front of the plump woman for an exercise routine, and she's talking about how they have to keep fit by natural means if necessary, stretch to stop the wrinkles, jog to kill the fat, run to beat old man time. We have to hold our ground until help comes and the secret is known. Whenever that is, moaned the miserable guy. Don't be so gloomy, Silas, says the bossy woman. She glares at the whole group and shouts, 20 push-ups! They drop down and begin doing their exercises because, well, she did just tell them to do 20 push-ups, and the whole group bops and flops and sags and drags and jumps and lumps and puffs and pants and moans and groans. Hairy Chest's big belly drooped beneath him. He didn't seem used to such hard exercise. It was an awesome sight, a sight that Sprocket didn't want to look at, but he couldn't help himself. He stares with wide open eyes at the mass of naked, jiggling flesh. There was no doubt about it at all. He'd stumbled upon a nudist colony. So yeah, that's the second Sprocket chapter done, and yeah, it's not as exciting as the first chapter, but it's a transition, and of course, like how are you going to beat a whole lot of like toddlers, or not toddlers, but yeah, just young kids running around with knives and mobile phones, literally jabbing at poo? Like, yeah, it's going to be hard to beat, but subsequent chapters shall beat it, and by the looks of it, we are, what is that? That's about, I'd say we're a good third or almost halfway through the book. It's not a long book, it's, what's that say, 68 pages. Yeah, it's only 68 pages long, so it's not a long book, but it is a very enjoyable book. And what makes the books even more enjoyable, or at the very least the abridgings more enjoyable, is help from my cousin Vera. She is over from Spain, and I gotta say, it makes reading and just talking to you in general a lot more lucid. I suppose that's the right term. As with the previous two videos, I'd like to keep these around 20 to 25 minutes for your ease of digestion, even though I'm well aware that this video is about 16 and a half minutes long. Shut up, I'm a little bit drunk. Cousin Vera's a type of gin. Fuck off. Oh, but also, speaking of digestion, if you struggle to digest these, I recommend slathering them in a lightly salted butter and sticking in a microwave for 15 seconds. Cheers.